Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with coach and consultant Gail Doby. She is a creative entrepreneur who has experienced both frustration and joy with her design business. After earning a finance degree and working for a Fortune 500 company, she decided to get a design degree because her friends kept asking her for help. She then opened her own interior design firm and experienced many of the challenges she wrote about in her book. She has a great story. Enjoy this interview.
Hello, Joe.
Hi, Gail. How are you?
I'm doing well.
First and foremost, thank you for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.
So before we get into your life in interior design and everything that you do, how was COVID for you? Now that we're coming out of it, how was that period of life for you? How did you change?
That's a great question. And Joe, I think like most people, my first few weeks of COVID were a little scary. I was in New York City and a little bit nervous about coming home, and most of all, just nervous about what was going to happen to my business and what was going to happen to everybody that I loved and cared about. And I think it just made me much more aware of how much I appreciated what I did have, and it also made me work harder to do things for other people because you never know when your time's up.
So how did your business do, during the pandemic and after? What kind of shift did you go through because of that?
Well, it's interesting. The year of 2020, the very first year, was our best year that we had ever had. And then, of course, in the following year, we started feeling the effects of not being able to meet with our clients in live events, and that did impact our business. So it was a little bit scary, to be honest, and we managed to pull through it. And like most people, we were very thankful for the PPP money from the SBA and the loans that were available. So I guess all of those years that we paid for taxes did help us through a very difficult time.
The karmic government wheel, so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So let's say you're transported right now in front of a bunch of grade school kids in your career day, and one of them looks up and says, "What do you do for a living? What do you do every day? And how do you do it so well?"
Well, I think I would, first of all, be flattered if they even asked that. But second of all, I do believe that what I would say to them is that I help people make their businesses better so they can take care of their families and their friends and communities.
So let's go back in time. Talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and kind of how you got to this place where interior design is your life and even writing. How did all that start for you?
Well, I think that I was born in Iowa City and ended up growing up in Arkansas and going to college the first time, getting a degree in finance. And then I went to work for a Fortune 500 company and was in sales and marketing for the industry of interiors. And I sold products, and I also worked with architects and designers. So that was my first interaction with the architecture and design community. And then later, I ended up, several friends liked the work that I did on my own home, so I was hired to help them with their homes and eventually got a design degree. And then eventually, back in 2007, I started seeing things change with our industry, and that's what really brought me into doing interior design business coaching.
So, the one thing, and I do visual arts, is that everybody has their voice, their style. What's your particular style? How do you approach interior design from your own personal perspective?
Well, I think that's a great question, but I know that when I was doing design, which has been a number of years now, I actually did start with artwork. I would either start with artwork or rugs, and I would pick the design direction based on that. So what you do is really important because that is usually the jumping off point for most designers to be able to do a good job. And then in terms of style, my personal style is more contemporary, but that is not necessarily what I live with because when I first moved to Colorado, a lot of people here in the state didn't really like contemporary. So I have a mixture in my house at this moment.
So you've helped 10,000 plus clients, 76 countries, and the thing that's fascinating to me about that is based here in America, you get all of these different flavors from all over the world, places that people probably in their lifetime won't be able to interact with. How do you maintain all of those different flavors of international design and maintain that integrity here in America?
Well, in terms of how I do coaching for the businesses of interior design for those people, of course, each country has its different flavor, and there are some nuances, but it's something that it's logic that helps to work with those different people. And I think that through the process of what I've done over the years, I've become a pretty good problem solver. So I'm usually able to help people figure out the best route for themselves, no matter what country they're in.
So I would think for most adults, probably some of the more daunting things that anybody could get involved with would be, say, moving to a whole different place in a whole other state, but also it would be setting up a business. Did you have any fear? What were your fears like of opening up your own consulting practice and diving in full on? What was that like for you?
Well, when I actually went back to do that, I was married at that point, and my husband and I both had decided to go back to school, so I got my second degree in interior design. And by the time I finished design school, I ended up getting quite a few jobs from friends and family, and from there, neighbors, and then the next thing you know, I started getting business. So that's how I got into it. I just fell into it, and I also was a very hard worker, and with a business background, I knew that I had to get out and sell and be able to bring in the business.
So who would you consider, heroes or role models for you that's inspired what you do and how you live your life?
Well, I think there's so many to choose from. That's one of those hard questions, because I don't think there's one person that could answer all of those things that I would be looking for in a mentor or maybe a guide. But I look for people who are successful in business, because that is really my passion, is the business of design. So I also find that people who are entrepreneurs who have jumped in and done things they didn't know how to do, I really admire that. So one of my favorites is Richard Branson. And I think he's probably one of the most brilliant guys, because besides being a great business person, he seems to be a very happy, kind, and interesting human being. And so I'd have to pick him.
So I guess I don't want to be assumptive with this question. If you can meet anybody alive today and have a conversation or hang out with them, who would you pick?
Well, I'd probably pick him, or I might even pick Oprah. I kind of like her. I think she's pretty interesting, and I love her because she's such a big reader, and she's very connected to people and has a wonderful way of presenting herself. So one of the two of them.
So speaking of reading, what was an early book for you that really was instrumental, that you remember was huge in your development of loving literature and reading?
Well, I couldn't pick just one. There are so many incredible books, but I would say of the recent things that I've read, one of my very favorites is Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. She is amazing, and I never was that great at figuring out what my emotions were. And when I read that book, and believe it or not, that's only about 8 months ago, I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I didn't know the difference between joy and happiness. So it was fascinating to me to read her book, and it's beautifully designed and is a great read as well.
So every day you wake up and you get to live your life and you have your own business, what do you look forward to the most? What gives you the most joy?
I absolutely love working with my clients. I love having them transform their businesses. And generally, most of them will say it transformed their lives, probably because they finally have confidence and knowledge to do something that they're passionate about, and they're able to make a fabulous living at it. So I think that's probably the first thing. And I'll pick one other, which is I love working with my team. I have the most amazing team, and they are so great to work with, and they have been with me for years, and that has been a real pleasure for me.
So as far as clients are concerned, what's been one of the best client responses that you got, one of your best fan letters, so to speak?
Well, I think that I get so many of those. But thankfully, I'm very fortunate there. I have one client that I love her story. She came to me when she was starting out by herself, and she was doing about $300,000 in revenue in her business. And just in the last year, I think she will exceed over $4 million. So that was done in a 7-year period, which is really pretty amazing.
If you have a dream tonight and you run into the younger version of yourself, say in your 20s, and you could give your younger version a piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained over all these years, what would you say to your younger version?
Well, I would tell that person, you must read. You must read all the time. Read as much as you can and as early as you can, because you are going to be ahead of other people if you can do that. And if you can stay ahead of other people in terms of your knowledge base, you're always going to have the answers that you need, or the creativity, or the connections that you need to find people to help you.
On the other end of this COVID pandemic that we've had and things are opening up, let's say we talk in 5 years from now. What are you looking forward to? What's kind of on your radar for things that you want to see happen in your life?
Well, goodness, that is a great question. And I have been working on scaling our business. So I would say probably in that time period, we expect to be about 10x from where we are right now. So that's a big jump for us. And I think that we will be in other industries as well. So I hope we are continuing to grow. That's what I'm looking forward to.
So everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
That's always a hard question to answer, isn't it? I think, Joe, I would probably say that I would like to think that people see me as a kind and generous person.
So, Gail, if anybody wants to learn more about you and what you do, render your services, your background, anything related to your world on the web, where can they go to find out?
Thanks for asking, and it's very simple. It's GailDoby.com.
Beautiful, Gail. Hey, thank you very much for taking time out.
Well, Joe, thank you for having me on the show. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and business around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.